Talking about you got this and you got that, and you gonna murder this one and murder that one. Talking all that bullshit. I'm gonna put it to you like this, yo.
This is for the nerds, this is for the brainiacs, this what we deserve. Go ahead and play it back, you ain't gonna touch me, you not gonna do nothing, you are not above me. I bet you wish you was me, I know it, I know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. Ooh, these headphones are way off my ear. Welcome back to another episode of the Only Friends podcast. It's moving day, boys.
Oh, it's time, baby. Let's go.
I don't like the excitement in your voice.
I can't help myself, man.
I don't like
this is Christmas morning for me.
No, this is so stupid.
I love it.
What is there to be excited about?
Oh, man. It's not the excitement of either candidate, because there's not a lot to be excited about. It's just the process. I love it. I'm a political junkie. I love watching all the results coming in and the magic wall and all the different scenarios that could happen.
This is why you play fantasy sports.
Probably.
I get nothing out of sweating my fantasy team.
Oh, my God. It's so much fun.
I respect the shit out of how much you love it.
I do.
When I talk to you about it, you really do.
Yeah,
Just love the process.
I do. It's going to be fun. I got some bets down. We're going to be wheeling and dealing. Maybe make some money. Maybe lose some money. It's all right.
I think for me, I think the fantasy sport is a good analogy. Like, I have my favorite team. I'm a Steelers fan through and through. That's all I care about in the NFL. I don't care about the other teams unless it impacts the Steelers. Like, I root against the Browns and the rest of the AFC North. But generally, like, I just don't give a shit what's happening between the Packers and the Lions type of thing. Fantasy sports, like, and betting in general, like, I could see where it stokes that fire. But, like, I've just always been, I've never really been interested in outcomes I can't control. So, like, just betting on things in general, even if you're on the sharp side,
right, never
felt like particularly thrilling to me.
But with fantasy football, you do have control. You have control of who you start, who you don't.
Right, but when you're sweating, you have no control.
Oh, yeah, right. Once you're locked in, you're locked in.
Right. Now, you may say when you're watching a Steeler game, you have no control either, but that's just not true.
Yeah,
I mean, we understand that, like, it's very clear how loudly I yell at the TV
exactly
dictates how the Steelers perform.
If you go into the kitchen to get a drink and they score a touchdown, now you have to spend the rest of the day in the kitchen.
In the kitchen. Everybody knows that, Brian. Everyone knows that. Like,
right.
It's very
But,
obvious.
like, you say you don't give a shit about the Packers and the Lions. I don't give a shit about the Packers and the Lions either until I have some fantasy football players on my team playing.
To be fair, I don't know if anybody gave a shit about the Packers versus the Lions until about 2 years ago, except for
Packers
Lions
maybe.
fans.
That's kind of fair.
I mean, I'm not saying that nobody likes the teams. I just meant that particular matchup wasn't very exciting until 2 years ago.
We have a way of just pissing off the Midwest. I mean, we really do. We just
I just think of my one. I just think of my one friend Ben, who's a massive Lions fan, and that's why I make these comments. Just in case he's watching, he can.
Okay.
Yeah, Corey's not happy. That's for sure.
Corey's pissed.
So, like, taking these analogies a little bit further of how I view the election, I performed my civic duty today. I got out and voted.
Good job, sir.
Very begrudgingly so.
There will be people that are happy to hear that.
I'm sure of it. I personally wasn't happy. I thought that SNL did a great skit that made me. It basically summarized my entire take on this particular election. And it was a game show where John Mulaney was the contestant, and they're showing him pictures of people's faces saying, like, who is that person? And they show him Kamala's husband, and he's like, that's my man. I don't even know the guy's fucking name, Brian or something. Anyway, that's my man, first husband, blah, 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 right? And then shows another picture, and it's like, I don't remember, whatever, somebody important to the Dem side. And then he goes, okay, you've made $3. Now, for $1 million, who is this man? And the VP candidate that ran alongside Clinton,
Hillary Clinton,
right, comes out and he goes, You said it was the most important election of our lifetime. I was one heartbeat away from becoming president. What's my name?
You're like, oh shit.
He goes, I mean, if you were as memorable as Tim Waltz, maybe I'd be able to remember. He goes, funny enough, my name is Tim. And they showed us side by side. He goes, I look exactly like him.
He really does.
They truly are spitting images of one another.
So funny.
And he's like, your name is Tim?
Yep.
And then they pulled the audience and they're like, Tim Scott. And he's like, no. So that to me was like a summary of like, I just feel like it all gets, I mean, it's natural, right? Like it's a thing that we just bitch and moan about for 4 years, and it all comes together in election season,
right?
Where everybody comes out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
The issue that I take with it is like, for me personally, once I see the fatal flaw in a system, I can't unsee it, right? I just can't unsee it, and it's like for a very long time, growing up where we grew up, and just kind of being spoon-fed civics and politics in the way that we were. I didn't care enough to do my own research. There you go. There you go. It's great. I didn't care enough to do my own research. And like, let's be honest, like I'm in a pretty privileged position as an adult. So again, very little impacts me with who gets elected outside of like how much of a joke our nation looks like to the rest of the world or otherwise. But you know, whenever you're kind of forced into a corner to make these choices where you don't like either side, and I feel that way this time. I felt that way with Gore Bush, where it was just like, do I really? I mean, look at these idiots. You know,
I agree with you there, Burke, because I like, you know me, and you know like the 3 a.m. phone calls you would get from me drunk.
Yeah, I'm gonna miss that this time around.
Right, like so. Crying basically because my candidate didn't win.
In your defense,
that,
Brian, you were so drunk.
Oh yes.
The fact you even remember you were crying is like a testament to your will.
But see, like I think my passion for like the person I support has dwindled. I've become jaded a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and I understand where you're coming from too. I still think there's a clear, clear person you should be voting for.
That's
but fair. Like but like the thing is that like the process of it, the intricacies of American politics, I'm still very, very much like passionate about. Like I love that part of it, right?
I would like to be. The problem is I feel like we have just continually been gaslit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
With regards to how the actual system performs. And it's funny because like as a kid, you just hear a bunch of adults bitching and moaning about it. And you're just like, these old fucks, they don't know what they're talking. And then you become the old fuck. And it's really hard not to just be shaking your fist at the clouds, screaming, get off my lawn. And it's like, I'm not even saying this in particular about one side or the other. I think they both just equally suck so hard. And the fatal flaw in the system is that there just isn't really viable options. Right? It's not even that there isn't a viable option between those two. That in and of itself is pretty shitty from my perspective. But it's the fact that it gets dwindled down to only two. And I think this cycle more so than any becomes like pretty obvious that we don't have that much of a say. Like for better or for worse, and I do tend to, in the past at least, I've leaned Democratic, but like for better or for worse, like Kamala was just forced on us. Yeah. It wasn't like there was a democratic process that brought her into this position.
Right. They had a basically a primary that they just pushed like for Biden. Like they did everything they could to, even though Biden had some challengers, but they did everything they could to make sure they were squashed, and he was just going to just sail to the nomination, and he's the incumbent president, which for all intents and purposes is what's going to happen anyways. But once they decided, once he had that debate and they were like, we can't run him, it wasn't like, oh, let's have some discourse on who is the best candidate. They were just like, I'm dropping out, I'm supporting her, and you should too, and then here we are. So it is kind of just like, well, we got what we got.
It just feels like it exposes the weaknesses and the flaws in the system that currently exist. And I think that what's good about
it's not a perfect system. It's much better than most places in the world.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Again, I'm nowhere near educated enough to like take a hard stance, but and obviously I do believe in the democratic process and in America and all these other things, but I think like what this cycle's process exposed that maybe people weren't super privy to because they weren't paying close enough attention, or they don't educate themselves, or they just don't care, is similar to what happened last cycle with getting Hillary pushed through. And I kind of just remember being so distracted by like Trump.
That was 2 cycles ago.
2 cycles ago. Yeah, you're right.
Well, listen, I'm the same way, right? I'm big Bernie guy, right? I supported
and honestly,
Bernie.
probably even Biden this last time.
Exactly.
Too.
Like
probably got pushed through.
This is what 100%. Bernie was running away with it until they all like essentially colluded against him to push him out.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, you know, they did it to him in 2016, and they did it to him again in 2020. And after that, I was just like, and that's kind of like the jadedness that I have because of like what I've seen transpire. But like it was
now like when stuff like that gets exposed, then I feel like you're picking a team, and this isn't a judgment against you, but I'm just saying like then I feel like you're forced into picking a team just for picking a team's sake.
Well, you still have to weigh the options of your choices and decide which choice is better to make. I mean, listen, I was a big Bernie guy, but I voted for Hillary and I voted for Joe Biden.
Of course.
Like, right? It's not like because there's a lot of people, you know, the Hillary people are going to say, it was the Bernie bros is the reason she lost. Well, no, she lost because she was a terrible candidate.
Right.
Right? That's why she lost. But like, you know, it wasn't like, oh, I'm not going to vote for, like, I looked at the 2 candidates and said, okay, well, which one is better? And I made the decision, right? And I think you can always do that. It's not just like, oh, they're both awful, so I'm just going to abstain.
The problem I have with that is, and I'm not saying that you're wrong. Of course, everything can't just distill down to a binary.
Don't rain on my day, though. Don't rain on my parade.
I mean, what else are we going to talk about?
I know.
The problem I have with that is that it takes a certain level of willful ignorance to arrive at that conclusion of like, well, one of these 2 are going to be president anyway. I'd like to have an impact on which one it is. Mm-hmm. You're like willfully ignoring that better candidates, perhaps, at least by your own personal judgment of who you would have chosen otherwise, were kind of shafted or routed in some sort of process, because it's all kind of bought and paid for.
Yeah.
And that's what makes me check out. Like now I just don't care. You know what I'm saying, Jesse?
I do know what you're saying, but I feel like Brian did the opposite, where he acknowledged that he got screwed in his wanting a better candidate and getting, for lack of better word, perhaps colluded against in the candidate that he wanted winning when maybe he would have won. And he's voting regardless. So I feel like it's not willingful ignorance. It's more he's accepted that and he's still just going to vote the way he thinks is best.
Yeah. You're right. Maybe willful ignorance was
I let that one slide. It was fine.
Well, no. No. Because I
got your back, dog.
I stand.
Thank you, Jesse. I appreciate it.
Also, that. I said willingful ignorance. What did you say?
Willful ignorance.
Willful ignorance. All right, fair enough.
I'm not sure which is right or wrong. I've been wrong before.
It's willful.
I think it's willful though. Anyway,
I don't know. I'm ignorant on it.
I agree with what you're saying. Like you're saying, like he's actually acknowledging the process. Therefore, how could he be ignorant to it? And yes, you're right. The better choice, the better turn of phrase would be like turning a blind eye, right? Because for me, and again, I don't think I'm right. By the way,
right?
I don't think that like abstaining is the route to change. Like if we all just collectively got together and said none of us fucking voted.
Listen, obviously you don't believe that. You went and voted today.
Yeah, like
trust me, it took a lot.
I know very begrudging.
I understand it was.
Every cycle, it's going to be harder.
It was. This time it wasn't begrudging, but there were times where it was begrudging. So I understand that.
Yeah,
right?
but it was kind of nice, by the way, to be in the mix, wasn't it? Like I don't know if you enjoyed it, but I liked getting in line and kind of mingling and seeing what's going on. I don't get a lot of that.
This is not him at all.
I don't think Matt was definitely digging that. Actually, you know what was more painful, the line that you were in today, or like registering for like a low stakes tournament at WSOP?
The line by a long shot.
But Jesse, you're kind of like have the same attitude as I do, where like you like the process. Like I can mail in my vote. Like you can do mail in ballots, but I don't want to do that. I want to go and do the process and see the people. And,
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
also I believe that Berkey and I have different ratings for people in general.
Maybe true.
And that's fair. I'm not saying that I'm right or you're
There was nothing
wrong.
wrong with the people that I was surrounded by. It's just I felt like I was camping out in line for a concert that I did not want to see.
That's such.
Yeah, I think
You
we
know?
all kind of had that,
That is good.
deep in our gut
Yeah.
a little bit.
But like
By
not
the way, great analogy.
Yeah, like I'm not talking like camping out in line for a concert that like you could power through and kind of enjoy. Like it wasn't like I was camping out for Morgan Wallen when I'm not a big country fan. It was more so like I was camping out for fucking, I don't know, man, like something awful to my ears that I was now not only going to have to sit in this line and wait for tickets for, but then actually show up to the show at some point down
But like
the line.
only Jesse, who's like the nicest person on the planet, could go do like a line of the most divisive people probably in the world,
Yeah.
and like that you could put together. He's like, it was fun to be here. How's everybody doing?
He's got his Dunkin' Donuts with him. He's like, hey, cheers, everybody.
Ashley told me if I went to vote, we could go get lattes after.
See, there you
so-
go.
there you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Bribed.
I really appreciated getting in line. Most of our exposure to politics at this point is via social media and the clusterfuck that is. And
Man, never has it become more clear to me too. Like seeing the way Elon is manipulating X to push his political agenda, it's just like so eye-opening.
it's like everything about social media, whatever, it's become such a joke. And when you get in line and you see people interacting with each other perfectly reasonably,
Yeah.
and just like not like nobody's like, who you voted, you know what I mean? Like it,
Yeah.
it
They
reminds
already-
you
they
that
already know.
most that's true, but
You can just size somebody up.
by the way, it's really fun to look at each person
guess?
and guess. Yeah, that is so
Right.
much fun.
That I actually could get behind. If
It's
you
a
told
great
me I had to
game.
wait in line for an hour and we could play the who are they voting for game and then they would tell us the answer and we could
Right.
gamble on that, I would so be in.
I wanted to do that with
There's
Ashley,
still
but if I
time.
started that conversation, I felt like somebody in line would start talking politics with me
sure.
because of that, and I didn't want to get.
Should we go to the,
open that can of
the
worms?
closest precinct after the pod? And
That
then-
would. Oh my god, we should film that and prop bet on
That would be
Very
great.
who's voting for what. That would be
Yeah.
a great show.
This
But
li-
it's really nice. Sorry to finish that.
No,
it's
go ahead,
it's
go
really nice to just see how reasonable most people are.
I agree.
Compared to the online persona of people in politics. I think it's like important to get that a little bit and
when
take
you
that in.
when you actually go and you talk to people like face to face, people are like you have hope for like humanity a little bit more than if you're just always on your phone on
Man,
X. Or
I have the
Twitter.
exact opposite feeling. Like, I just feel like none of us are qualified. And this isn't.
Oh, none of us are qualified.
Yeah, this isn't a shortcoming of the system necessarily. It's a shortcoming of America. Like, what we do to qualify the voters to actually go. I mean, again, it's just a system set up to fail. You keep everybody blindly ignorant. You create a divisive two-party system where you have to pick one team or the other, and the only issues that they differ on are ones that have no resolution. They're like social issues or divisive issues like abortion and things of that nature, where there's a clear divide in America. It's like a clear 50-50 that we just can't come to a conclusion of like this is good or bad. And these are the only platforms they run on. The only shit that I've seen from either side is Trump attacking Kamala about trying to get transgendered prisoners sex change operations and her attacking him about God knows what, like incompetence, like not being able to open a door or like whatever the fuck, or being a racist or grabbing girls by the pussy. And it's just like, how are you what represents this country?
Yeah.
Where is the guy who just like men used to go to war?
I don't know, Burke. I mean, there
Give me
is
Colin
that,
Powell back. How did that guy not get elected?
I think it's a false equivalency that you're making. I really do. I
Okay,
mean, it's
go
just
on.
well, I mean, like if you literally, which I know you're not, like you don't have your tentacles in it like I do, but like if you literally watch both candidates and you listen to them their stump speeches, you listen to them their rallies, you watch all their interviews and stuff, there's a stark difference. Like Kamala is definitely talking about the issues way more than Trump. All Trump has been doing is it's been divisive and attacking. And of course she does that. Yes, she does. She kind of has to.
Right, but I'm not. My greater point is that's because that's what works. Like that's just generally what the general populace is consuming.
We're gonna find out in a few short hours.
Well, you say that, but like the general population, I represent the general population more than you do. The general population is not balls deep in watching these speeches and stuff, so they're consuming what I'm consuming.
Yeah,
and the end of the day, it's just a popularity contest.
Yeah. Well, sound bites work.
Yeah, soundbites for sure.
Yeah, they
like having a really
quickly.
controversial soundbite is going to catch people's attention and trigger some sort of outrage in them.
And man, this cycle has been.
You wouldn't see those that commercial you're talking about with the transgender surgeries.
Yeah.
You wouldn't see that commercial 1,000 times if it wasn't effective.
Of course, no, of course. But again, like that's kind of my whole problem with the system as it stands.
Mm-hmm.
And you can peel away a million different layers as to like how that could possibly be corrected. I won't go into that far, but this cycle has been wild. This has been reality TV playing out in front of our eyes. We've seen assassination attempt like on camera, with like the wildest details emerging after the fact. This guy's ear just fucking
we watched
healed
Biden
up in
literally
hours.
short circuit on
Biden's been dead for fucking 6
debate,
months.
Right,
He's
dropped out. Someone else just thrown in the mix. They got a month and a half to put the campaign.
Yeah,
3 months to put the campaign together.
he legitimately might be a Tesla robot in a skin suit right now. As generation one of these things like taking over the universe.
Oh man!
We've seen Elon basically become the face of the Republican campain, more so maybe even than Trump. Like he kind of just said like, "Hey, hold on, like you're not so likable here from the smart, intelligent people. So let me jump in the ring, combat Mark Cuban." Call him a lesbian, and
did he call him a lesbian?
Oh, yeah, bro, this is all I see.
That's not That's not a good insult for Cuban.
I think it's because he lost a lot of weight. He has this like skinny, oldish look to him now.
Fair enough.
Like he aged a lot, I think, in the last couple of years. He looks like he went through an election cycle. but yeah, no, I mean, obviously, ad hominem attacks are not the way to appeal to smart people. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't matter anymore. Everybody left their fucking brain at the door. Yeah. We're all just like pitchforks out, ready to attack the other side. And like everybody who's somewhere in the middle that like actually cares about a democratic process. And
I do also feel that you get the majority of what you see from Twitter or X or whatever.
I think I see a lot there. I think I see a lot on... I mean, it's all media channels, right? It's YouTube, it's TV, it's even like listening to podcasts and shit like that. It comes through, especially when you're too cheap to get the ad-free version.
You have ad-free version of YouTube.
Yeah. No, YouTube TV. I don't. I mean, sorry, let me rephrase. There's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
Yeah, they fucking...
You still have to watch commercials. Yeah.
Somebody made the greatest tweet I've seen. They said, if you vote early, it should come with a QR code that you can scan on your TV to get all political ads removed.
Man,
I love that.
Genius.
I'll tell you what, if that doesn't have voter turnout, I don't know what would.
Yeah, right?
There's a number of really great ideas that I've heard over my lifetime. That's definitely in the mix. Another one that I like that was political was every candidate should, if you have a donor over X dollars, you should have to wear them as a patch. So
like a race car driver.
Yeah. So like if you've got Hillary on stage and she's talking up like, oh, we need to work on the environment, but she's got this giant oil company like Halliburton patch. Yeah. It's like, okay, lady, like
God, that's so good.
I think that's a really good idea.
Yep.
Yeah. That's the stuff that interests me. I'm fascinated by the wheels that make the machine turn. Mm-hmm. Like I would love to see kind of like following the money trail behind all the different candidates, all the super PACs. I don't know if you saw this, but I think Elon is in court either today or yesterday in Pennsylvania regarding this like $1 million sweepstakes or whatever the fuck he's doing.
Yes.
Trying to encourage people to vote for Trump.
Yeah, basically he had a petition, and if you sign, all you had to do was sign the petition saying that you are going to register to vote, and support Trump. and you got entered to win $1
Right.
million. Somebody from I think from Vegas.
I saw somebody from
Yeah.
Vegas won one. They were doing it 100 times, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was giving away 100 million total, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I mean, honestly,
Dropping a
like
bucket for him.
I hate to admit it, but I think some of the better sources as far as like consuming content goes, not whether or not it's biased, I'm not privy enough to say, but like places like, I've always enjoyed Jon Stewart's takes on things. Granted, he leans left.
Yeah.
Same with
John Oliver.
John Oliver. And who used to do the late night show? Maybe he still does. Stephen Colbert. Like all guys who came from the Daily Show originally.
Stephen Colbert was great when he did the Stephen Colbert show that was on after Jon Stewart, and he's been like a little, like, I don't know, seems like more corporate now that he's on CBS.
It was when he did the Stephen Colbert show that he was doing the Super PAC bit for like ages, right? Like he would have guests come on and basically like try to get them to contribute.
Yeah,
to his
he had his
Super
own Super PAC,
PAC.
right?
Yeah, stuff like that. I don't necessarily know that it's super helpful in making decisions, but I think it is super helpful bringing to light like the issues with the system, which that's just the way my brain works. Like I like to problem solve, and when I see something that just feels like it's riddled with problems, my mind gravitates towards like, can't we be doing better with this whole process rather than just shrugging and saying like, okay, these are the two that we're left with. Like, let's just all vote at that point. Because to me, like, to make a poker analogy, like a poker study analogy, it would be like ignoring every node in a game tree until you got to a binary river decision of all in or fold, and then just being passionately behind one of those two decisions. And it being like a mixed candidate. Like you could just do both, right? But like you're vehement that it has to jam, and the next guy is just like completely adamant that it has to fold. And that's just it. There's no budging either one of you. And it's like, Jesus Christ, like we have so much we could go back and examine that got us to this point that could maybe give us a better insight.
Yeah, the issue is that we don't get any say over the rest of the nodes.
Right.
So it's like I get what you're saying, because it is silly that we're so
right. You're just fixed into
so
this
passionate
line. Yeah.
when you're right. Like the whole system leading to it is all messed up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep my swearing at a minimum for this particular episode because I could go off the rails very quickly. But yeah, I mean it's still like the only decision point we get. So we're gonna argue it, right? And we're gonna rally for our side or whatever.
Yeah, but you're right. You eliminate a very important point, because as somebody who doesn't care, an objective third party, if you will, if you presented that to me and I saw two people just like at each other's throats over it, my instinct would be like, well, actually, I would have checked the turn. You know, like I'm not so confident that this line that we used to get here was the best line that we could have taken. Let's go back and reevaluate. And they're just like, nope, it's fixed. Like we had to take this line and this line only. Now, what do you want to do? Jam or fold? And like literally, that's where I'm at. Like I don't care.
Right.
I don't care. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, and it feels like the previous streets were chosen by somebody who's not even a poker player. Sometimes,
right.
Not that they're not chosen by politicians, but like,
or at least
they're
doesn't
just clicking
represent
buttons.
Yeah, or at least doesn't represent the way that like I think personally.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like I don't really have any insight over what they did to force me into this decision, and now I'm like kind of left with a life or death decision, and I don't care. You know, I'm flipping coins for it.
Well,
I think. Oh, sorry.
No, I was gonna say it is. Go ahead.
Well, I think a big problem is that I mean we're kind of treading on like more philosophical issues, so it doesn't really, but like it's a system that there's a lot of momentum to it, and there's not a lot of room to move backwards from where we've come.
Right.
So like for instance, I think term limits would be a really good idea, but the only way you can get rid of you could set term limits and get rid of career politicians is to have them vote on term limits,
vote
which
against
means,
their own interests.
Yeah,
Right.
which
Exactly.
like so it's just never going to happen.
Yeah.
Despite a certain parent of mine, a male parent of mine, ranting every time I see them about how we got to vote against term limits or vote for term limits.
Right.
But like there's a lot of things like that going on, and it's tough because it's almost like in your analogy, not a lot of the nodes are locked in for maybe not a good reason, but a pretty strong reason.
Right. It's not that it's morally or philosophically good. It's that it's structurally sound. And so you can't really go back.
Yeah. Or
right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Because like thinking about it in like a bigger picture sense, we don't have forefathers that could unite a revolution at this point, right? There's nothing that can really upset the Constitution. We're kind of like prefixed to the structure that they created, and the problem is that the world changed a lot. Like we're a much more populated, much more diverse nation than we may have been back then. Also, they could have never necessarily predicted all of the iterations of how that system could play out, right? So we do land ourselves in a situation where there are career politicians who maybe are easily controlled by money. Like essentially, again, it comes down to like following the money. And more importantly, I guess there was a lot of slippery slope type of amendments that we could make that allowed us to get to this point. Right, like
Citizens United.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure they didn't have super PACs in mind whenever they drew up the Constitution. It probably wasn't too much of an issue.
Yeah, I sorry to interrupt. I do feel like Citizens United is one of the most important things that's happened in our lifetime politically, and like we just don't give it that much.
No, nobody talks about it. Right?
Yeah,
right.
and it's just like this massive fu to the average person.
Yeah, if you go back and look at like how much money was actually being filtered into politics pre Citizens United and what it is now, I mean, it was like, it was unheard of to have like $100 million like raised for like one candidate for one election cycle, and now we're talking billions. Billion, and this is why you see nonstop ads, nonstop text messages. And when you guys hate the text messages, go out there and fight against Citizens United, and you'll get less of them because they won't be able to pay for people to put them out and all the ads and everything you see. So,
kind of to the point what you're saying, like, and I could very much be wrong about this, but I do believe that most people get into politics, like most politicians get into politics with good intentions
for the right reasons. I totally agree.
And
with
I think the system at this point is set up so well to turn them into something different. Yeah, where like they realize like, oh, it's actually very difficult to make any significant changes, even any minor changes.
Right.
But it's not that difficult to make a lot of deals where I get very rich.
Correct.
And I think that's what happens.
Also,
more than, and that's kind of sad.
Yeah, if I don't accept this PAC money, then I'm just going to get primaried. Or I'm going to get my opponent is just going to outspend me, and I can't win.
Right.
And then they think like, like I know I'll do good, so I'll take this money. But like when I get in, I'll do good because like, I have to take the money so I can stay in to do the good. Because if this other person gets in, then they're going to do the bad, and then all of a sudden everyone's just
it's a giant fallacy.
Getting influenced by money.
Yeah, it's a giant fallacy that's kind of controlled by whoever is really willing to fund it. I think to that point, one of the things that like Jesse touched on there is the notion of corruption. And honestly, I don't even know if it's necessarily conscious corruption so much as like individuals get compromised that leads to an overall corrupt system, right? Because like you said, the incentives just don't align. If you actually cannot make any reasonable change, and that was your whole reason for getting into politics, is that you had a mission, a purpose that you wanted to fulfill, and then you just run into roadblocks that don't allow for that. But in the meantime, somebody offers you ability to eat, and they give you the ability to put a roof over your head. And then you kind of get accustomed to that lifestyle, and somebody offers you another carrot on a string that says, well, if you enjoy this food on your plate and roof over your head, wouldn't you like a luxurious car in the driveway, right? And then one thing leads to another. And I'm saying this kind of from a place of, I don't know that I've necessarily experienced this myself. Maybe I have to some degree. But every system is exposed to this level of corruption or the ability to be compromised to some degree. Even like ours in poker, it's not a meritocracy. Like we love to believe that it is, but like I'm walking proof of it. Like no way my lifetime earn is what it is if I'm just forced to play public games that are much smaller in stakes than what I'm privy to, and much tougher, by the way, than what I'm privy to in the private sector. And the only reason I'm in the private sector is because somebody offered me an opportunity. And the only reason they offered me an opportunity is because they saw something in it for themselves, right? So it's like, it's a give and take in all sort of capacities. And what ends up happening is when incentives finally align, you're so far away from the purpose that that's now just been discarded, right? And it does just become this framework of, well, I've now morphed into the system that currently exists. Nobody's going to change it. So I may as well benefit from what's been created and the hard work that I've put into it. It's kind of sad. You know, it's very disheartening whenever you think about the original framework of like what this nation was built on and how we've gotten to this point, I suppose. But you know, empires come to an end. You ever think about the Roman Empire?
I read something today that was kind of interesting. Somebody said, so generally not generally, historically, whoever controls the world currency is the world power, or maybe it's the other way around, but one thing kind of leads into the other.
Yeah.
We're the first world power who can essentially convert our currency into what is likely the next world currency, Bitcoin. If Bitcoin ends up being the next world's currency.
Right.
Which is kind of an interesting concept. But I also think we become global, so things are changing anyways.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting because we're not the only ones with that opportunity, right? And the amount of Bitcoin available is finite. So in theory, if we're looking at this from a game theory perspective, what should effectively happen is the 4 or 5 major world powers that are out there that have a lot of liquidity. And I'm not even so sure we qualify because our money is technically just theoretical. Like
most places are.
Yeah.
It's all fiat, right?
Yeah, it's all right. That's not what I mean. What I mean is that like we're gravely indebted to the Chinese
right.
And other countries where it's like if they want to convert that debt, we would just be buying them Bitcoin at that point. But I guess my point is like in theory, what should happen is like whatever the stockpile of Bitcoin is, whatever the total supply is, it should mostly divide up amongst these major world powers. And, you know, that should ultimately be both what keeps them in that seated position moving forward and what prevents any sort of like world domination from one specific place, right? Because like that's been the thing that has kept us at bay. It's like, well, we have the #1 military, which allows us to maintain our status, but our fiat just continually gets worse and worse by comparison. I imagine in our lifetimes, there's a good chance that the Chinese yen or something along those lines overtakes us. I mean, I'm not an economist. This would be a great topic for Barber.
But you got to bring somebody else on besides myself.
I'm obviously I'm just like speculating, but it's just like, you know, it's very clear that they have a lot of world influence economically speaking, especially when you couple the fact that like we're indebted to them. So it does seem like if there's a conversion to Bitcoin, it's not just going to be us, you know. But I don't know that that's happening at scale, right? Like
it's not.
It's happening more so. It's happening more so one layer down. It's not countries doing it. It's corporations. It's BlackRock. It's whoever else has the foresight to recognize that they can
MicroStrategy for sure.
Yeah, like they can become the world power. And they don't need a country behind them.
It's like I don't want to say third world countries, but there's like, you know, smaller countries that have smaller GDPs that are like, you know, because they can afford to gamble, right? They're at the bottom. Like they might as well take a chance, right? You have Nayib Bukele in El Salvador, right? He decided 4 or 5 years ago that we're gonna make Bitcoin legal tender and put it on.
I mean, their money was literally littering the streets, right? So it was so worthless.
Yeah. So
it wasn't worth the paper it was printed on.
Yeah, but
the dollar's still quite strong.
It is.
No, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to like downplay.
Right. It's still much stronger than the yen. It's
of course.
Than anything.
Of course. It was more of a projection forward where it's like you could see that we're trending in the wrong direction in a lot of ways, whereas nations like China are just continually growing and becoming more of an economic force. What
I
what
would
is
love
this?
to see what the comments are right now because this is
We've
This is
ventured
one hell
down
of
a
a poker
path that-
podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, yeah.
A lot about the borders.
We
They love to talk
I
about
mean,
the borders.
hey, listen, we
Oh, baby.
poker is gambling, and now with everything out there, you can gamble on this election tonight. Burke, you getting money down or what?
I want to bet. I want to take the price on Kamala.
Okay.
Not even because I'm like a big believer in it.
No, but I mean, if you think it's 50-50, it's
Well,
very close, and you can get odds on her.
I don't know if that's the case. I just think there's more likely to be margin of error on the dog
Yes.
than there is on the favorite right now.
Right.
And effectively, I want to get like enough down on her as the dog that when states start getting called, if I see like really favorable movements one way or the other, I can, because I'm just thinking back to 2020 and what a big missed opportunity it was.
Right.
When there was points that like
I'm sure people have gotten smarter in the 4 years. It's not gonna be as easy as it was in 2020,
Sure.
which you understand. That.
Well, but getting money down is like way easier, and
Yes.
and it's not necessarily like a lot of sharp money that's out there, right? Like
Mhm.
for what it's worth, like in 2020, the majority of the bets being taken were happening in like OTC chats. So these are like relatively sharp people who have crypto on hand and are looking, but they're also
was Poly Market around for 2020.
if they were, we didn't
was small
we
if
didn't
it
have
was,
access or they had
yeah.
small. It was the
it was
other.
definitely
it
around
was all
2021.
sports
I
betting
remember
sites, right? Weren't we just? I mean, I
It was
know
spo-
I was using
it was
like
sports betting
BOL.
sites. It was predicted, but predicted like
Predicted was super capped. It was like
yes, you could
Yeah.
only you're capped out at like $850 per contract. So.
yeah.
I just remember using like maybe I won't mention the exact names, but a few like poker / sports betting sites,
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
and I remember betting a lot of money on Biden and losing money on the bet because I won the bet, but it was Bitcoin that was locked up until January 6th, which was a tremendous loss
Right.
because Bitcoin ran up so hard. So it
Right.
was really frustrating, and that's a good warning to people not to use third party
Mm-hmm. Right.
sports
Yeah.
betting sites
I
if you
think
don't
if you
have
live,
to.
yeah, if you live in America and you really want to bet on the election, I think the best places to go are probably Kalshi, and you can actually Robinhood. You can actually bet on the election on Robinhood now too.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you know
No
do you know what the volume is on Robinhood?
I know I didn't look into it.
It's
but-
relatively low on Kalshi.
I mean,
It's like 1/10 of Polymarket, maybe less.
Yeah.
1/20th.
but that could favor you in a way,
I mean, it hasn't thus
Yeah.
far. The lines have been a lot closer to 50-50 on Kalshi for the
Have they
majority,
been?
for the most part. But again, it's like because a lot of whale money came in on Polymarket early.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I remember 2020 was mostly peer to peer. So like Florida gets called, suddenly Biden is like 3-1, and then a couple of the other swing states went Trump's way, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember like upwards of 9-1, maybe 10-1. Biden was going, kind of coming into the West Coast
Yeah.
swing last year.
There's
And
going to be
Wait, you're saying Biden was a 10-1 favorite at one point?
Dog.
Oh, okay.
Dog.
That, yeah,
Yeah.
I remember
what
that.
happened. What happened was, and this could happen again this year. I don't know if it will or not. Probably not to the impact of last cycle because of the mail-in ballots and how many there were. But essentially, states like Pennsylvania, they count all of the in-person votes first, and then they count the mail-in ballots.
Mhm.
Right. So like when the polls close, you just get a dump of the in-person ballots. And last cycle, Trump was out telling his supporters, don't vote by mail. It's a scam. You got to go in person. So like the in-person vote was heavily skewed towards him, while the mail-in ballots were heavily skewed towards Democrats. So the numbers come in and Trump shoots up, and it looks like he's going to crush Pennsylvania. And if he crushes Pennsylvania, he's just going to win the election because it's probably all the other states are going to be similar. And people saw that, and that's when the market like swung his way heavily. And then throughout the night, as they were counting the mail-in ballots, it started shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So if you were able to get down on Biden, if you knew this was coming, you could get down on Biden at when that happened, you could get that 9-1. You could get that 8-1 huge underdog bet, and it wasn't warranted because of actually how the votes are being counted.
I remember Empire Maker 2. Do you guys remember that
Oh
guy?
yeah.
He was hammered that night, and he was just talking trash on Twitter, trying to book as much money as he could on the Biden side. He was like the only one who seemed to understand how they were counting votes, because everyone else was like, what are you doing? You're torching money.
Right, exactly.
He was like, well, bet me.
Yeah. Yeah, if you understand like the political process and how they count these votes and where they come in and when they come in, you can have a huge edge over the field for sure.
Can you still, do you think, or was that a one-off where people figured it out?
I think you still can. And I think it's going to happen again this time, but not to the scale of it, because of the the ratio of mail-in ballots to in-person ballots is not as imbalanced now as it was.
That's fair.
2020.
I thought maybe people would have learned their lesson in the gambling world.
I think what you're talking about is
somewhat
more so with the peer-to-peers.
Yeah.
I think people will be a lot more hesitant to just lay the long odds. There was a lot of money getting down. Like I remember Sean Perry put a lot down on Trump when it was, trending heavy favorite, like probably all the way from like 3-1 and beyond.
I heard he had $1 million on the Vikings last weekend, according to my Instagram.
Wow.
No, I don't know if it was the Vikings. I'm just I get videos every week.
Right.
Oh man.
From that Telegram group that you joined?
Yeah.
Yeah. $1,500 a year.
It's weird. They keep sending me these PDFs, and when I open them, there's nothing in them, and my computer doesn't work. It's wild.
That is pretty wild.
Oh man.
Did you put anyone down on the bet or on the election?
No, I didn't.
Does it feel bad sitting on the sidelines? Like that's how I feel angsty right now.
No, it actually feels a lot better because I had a lot of money on the last election and an emotional attachment. And I did not know the way that they were counting it, like the run out of how they counted it. And I basically just had to go and play pickleball for like 4 hours instead of looking at updates on my phone at one point, because I was feeling it. It was like so far and away the biggest bet I've ever made outside of poker. That I should have done something different, probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you did well.
I think I like the idea of having bet Kamala leading up to this, because I just think that Nate Silver's a huge favorite to be the smartest guy when it comes to this stuff. But
right.
And he says it's like close to a flip. But
it's interesting because he he's been kind of like coming out and saying that, like, all the pollsters they're herding, which essentially means they are getting all the polls that they get that show outliers, that show like, it's swinging one way or the other. They're not even releasing those. They're just releasing the ones that are like 50-50 or close to 50-50, because they don't want to be wrong, right? They don't want to be like, they're afraid that like they're going to like, Trump's going to outperform the polls again, or they just don't want to be wrong. But, so he can only go by the information that he has. But I think that we have that tweet of his where he ran 80,000 iterations of the sim, and it came back Kamala winning 40,012 of them.
It's also,
so that's as close as you can get. Now that's with like, if you do believe all the polls and they are on the up and up, then it's going to be very, very close.
It's kind of silly too, because maybe my understanding of this is wrong, but it feels like all of the people who said that it's 50-50 or close to it to go one way or the other, it's hard to prove them wrong after the fact, right? Because even if, let's say it's a blowout in Trump's favor or a blowout in Kamal's favor, they could say, yeah, like sometimes in that 50-50, it's a blowout one way or the other, but the way that we ran it, it was still 50-50. And it's hard to argue with that, right? Because 50% of the time that thing happens.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think like, for instance, in 2016, it was wild that Nate got so much shit for not saying that Trump was a favorite when Trump won, when Nate was saying that he was like, I think he said he was like a third, like 33%.
Something like that.
He had him 70-30 or 30-70.
Yeah, when almost everyone else had
like
Trump
90,
at like 5% or 10%.
Yeah.
I think the big,
and it's like, guys, I don't know if you're aware of this, but 30% comes in a lot.
Right.
Yeah, I think the issue is that, like, because it's poll based, the narrative or the notion amongst the public is that, like, somebody who's 70% to win based on polls is actually pretty fucking close to 100%, because they don't expect it to err the other way.
Right.
right? Like usually if somebody's showing that much of an overwhelming majority of support, then it's very unlikely that there's some corrective balance here.
Yeah, but Nate's factoring that concept in if it's applicable, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess like I get it from the average layperson's point of view, where like seeing that Clinton is 90% versus 70% means nothing. Like that's still just a Clinton victory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
Whereas like when you see something like this, where it's literally like 50.01 to 49.9,
right,
it's pretty fucking clear we don't have a decisive take one way or the other. And obviously that's not actually reflective of what's happening. I don't suspect that the election is going to be that close.
Anybody have any bold takes?
You do.
Yeah. I got a couple.
I know you do. I know you think it's likely to be
I think
a big victory one way or the other.
Yeah. I mean, I do think we're gonna see everything like I said, it's so close. And I think it's so close as meaning nobody knows. But I think that the country is going to go one way or the other. Like I think it's more likely that we see a sweep of the swing states by one of the candidates than we do see it like somebody wins the blue wall and somebody wins the southern states. Mm-hmm. Like I really think it's going to be one way or the other. And I mean, every like election, I feel like you see something that surprises you, right? Like whether it be, you know, something crazy happening like Kamala winning Florida, right? Or like Trump winning Virginia or something like that, you know? But like I could see a world where, you know, it shifts because when the country shifts, it shifts quick, right? And like people couldn't believe that like Trump could come in 2016 and win, right? How the hell 90% favorite and now he comes in and wins, right? So that it can swing that way, but it can swing the other way just as quick.
It's very interesting to me. So you saw Guapo put up Nick Wright's take. It's a pretty bold take. He kind of aligns with you here. He's saying that his official prediction is that Harris will win 295 to 243. She'll sweep the blue wall, add in Georgia and Nevada. Trump retains North Carolina, but flips Arizona.
Yeah.
He says the closest Harris win will be Nevada. The closest Trump win will be Arizona. I'll tell you what, from the line I saw today, just using my perception as a poker player and ability to read people, Harris looks good in Nevada.
I almost bet Harris in Nevada after standing in line.
That line was very full of minorities and women.
Right.
Which I guess also in the... Well, no, it's not poker. It's 50-50. But yeah, I mean, in this instance, the turnout, like I was very much a speck of salt in a sea of pepper.
Yeah.
And I don't imagine that is super common when it comes to these elections. So it does kind of speak to the divisiveness of it all.
Like I don't want to say that like, you know, I'm not here saying that like Kamala's going to like have a landslide or anything. I think it, you know, Trump could too. Like it could just be like, you know what? Everyone they go to the grocery store and they see how much the prices are up and people are like, hey, look, who's in charge? Or Democrats are in charge and my shit is twice as expensive as it was when Trump was in there.
I think a lot of people judge that way.
Right.
You and I talked about this.
Right.
Where I was like, you know, I think a lot of people believe Biden was a terrible president. You're like, based on what? I'm like, well, eggs are expensive.
Exactly. Right. And they exactly the people. So it could shift that way and you could just see Trump just run away with it.
Yeah.
But then it could go the other way where you're looking at like, now I know it was an outlier poll, but it's one of the best pollsters in the country, came out of Des Moines, Iowa, where they had Kamala winning Iowa. Now, do I think she's going to win Iowa? Unlikely, but like if it shifts like it could, then she could. And what it was showing that older women were like coming out for her like in droves essentially. So it's like, you know, even you have all these Republican voters, older women Republican voters that are now voting for Kamala for, you know, whatever reasons. It could be abortion or whatever. And if, you know, if all of a sudden you get like, and who votes the most in our country, it's older people, right? So if you have like a giant wave of older Republican women coming out and switching for Kamala, that's where you can see a big shift in the country and a big wave in one direction.
I will say what I found fascinating this election cycle. I particularly found this interesting because again, as somebody who doesn't have a hard loyalty one way or the other, there are certain optical things that I think just like are pretty clear and evident to me. And again, maybe it's just based off of my worldview. I'm sure it is. But, you know, Trump, whether you vote for him or not, doesn't really change that optically he's viewed as pretty deplorable.
Mm-hmm.
And that was pretty clear in 2016 when he won the election, but had almost no public outcry of support, right? Like people were very closeted in their support of Trump. And even in the 2020 cycle where he ultimately lost to Biden, I don't really recall a lot of outward support, right? There was still a lot of like, you know, they're the people who voted for him, or sorry, there were the people who were betting on him post-election that obviously were like huge MAGA guys. But just if you weren't willing to wear the Make America Great Again hat, but you were voting for Trump, you kept it to yourself kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That was the quiet voter. That's why the polls, why he outperformed the polls.
Right.
In 16 and in 2020.
Right. But this time, I feel a very, very strong shift in the overall tone of America, the people that are willing to, like, the athletes that are unapologetically kind of aligning themselves that way. It's
not taboo anymore to be a Trump supporter, like it was then.
What's strangest to me is how proudly people will correlate Andrew Tate and Trump and be okay with that.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like I can correlate the two of them in certain ways. There are certain overlaps between the two of them, but it's only in the negative way. Like whatever positives there are of Andrew Tate or Trump, I don't really think have much overlap. But the negative things you can say about both of them, I think the Venn diagram is like pretty shaded there. And it seems like the inverse for the people that are very vocal. Like they're proud of the shaded part.
Yeah.
And somehow that represents, and I kind of get it, because that represents an overturn of the system that we've just had in place forever, right? It's just like, well, fuck it. How much worse could it get? You know what I mean?
Elon calls himself Dark MAGA.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I was surprised that he kind of came out public, because I feel like he very much either was quiet or leaned the other way previously. Mm-hmm. But
he said he was a Democrat. He was like a registered Democrat.
But what doesn't surprise me, I think, is that Elon is a very intelligent, powerful person. And I think that he recognizes that he can overly influence Trump should he get elected. And that's just a really great position to be in.
And that's a lot of Trump supporters are banking on.
Exactly.
Too. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, well, maybe by proxy we're electing Elon. And honestly, that was the most compelling argument that somebody made for me.
Right.
It was just like, well, if you vote for Trump, you're kind of voting for Elon.
Yeah.
And it's like, that kind of cancels some negatives out for me in some sort of way.
Yeah. I mean, like, I hate Elon for what, like, not
socially, he's a nightmare.
But like, I think he's an amazing innovator, genius. Like, every company he, well, except for Twitter maybe, but like, other than that, like, I mean, look at SpaceX, look at Tesla, like, these are like amazing companies. And so, like, the guy is a pure genius, we know that. So, like, if Trump gets elected and he's in there, maybe he does something good. We'll see.
Yeah. I think from both sides, I've never seen a more clear indication that people are speaking directly for their own, like, for instance, their own anecdotal worldview. There just seems to be no more greater good. I feel like that if that hadn't been abandoned in previous election cycles, it feels like it certainly has this time. And I think that, ironically, one of the more off-putting things to me about the people rallying behind Kamala was the attempt to grasp at straws for the greater good. It was the pandering to a vote for her is a vote for women. It's a vote for these rights that may not affect you.
I thought the fact that, like, her campaign specifically didn't mention about, like, the historical aspect of her campaign.
Not that. I'm saying more so like to vote on the issue of Roe.
Okay. Well, yeah.
And stuff like
Right.
that, which
Yes, that
very reasonable take. I just felt like it was falling on deaf ears because this election cycle is not like those of the past. People aren't seemingly voting on the interest of the greater good. They're voting on their own direct interests. I mean, look at the crypto bros. None of them voted for Trump these past 2 cycles, or very few of them.
Yeah.
They're coming.
Probably more than you think.
Yeah, more.
Maybe,
I'd say way more
okay,
than
fine.
you think. Way
Fine,
more
maybe.
than you
But
think,
if they did, they certainly weren't publicly supporting him.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
They're
weren't
coming out in droves
They weren't
this time
publicly
around.
supporting him because he wasn't publicly supporting Bitcoin. Now he came out. He came out and was like, "I'm the Bitcoin president," so they
Right.
all rallied behind him.
I think it's difficult to have a greater good type of message while being a capitalistic society,
Agreed.
like pure capitalism, I should say. Whereas, like, you know,
I think that's where the Dems lose.
yeah, it's difficult, and you could argue that we have a lot of issues because we try to split the difference between the two things.
Agreed.
With Medicare and stuff like that, and it doesn't work out very well. You kind of need to pick a lane to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to get into that because that's beyond my pay grade. But
I think you're right, though.
Yeah.
I think just as a general anecdote, like you're correct.
I think we're realizing it more.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so people are kind of picking a side almost.
Right.
Which
Or being forced into one.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's nice to like put that into words though, because
Right.
I've kind of felt that way, but I like the way that you said that.
Yeah, and I think that's really what's at my core just like bothered me the most this time around is that maybe I just have like a little bit of I don't know if like guilt is necessarily the right word, but it's like I just recognize that the election won't impact me and like I'm in a very good spot in life. So it becomes more bothersome to not kind of like be looking at the big picture, the whole picture whenever it comes to making these decisions. Because it's very easy to just vote with your wallet. It's very easy to just be self-centered and at the end of the day, we are anyway, right? Like even if you're trying to do it for altruistic motives of like, well, I want to see Roe overturned on behalf of all the women in my life and I want this, that, or the other. It's like, well, at the same time, you're also just like ignoring Israel and Gaza, you know, and you're ignoring all these other issues that you're now prioritizing this small subset over. And it's just like, you know, it's a lose-lose when you really try to vote with a conscience.
Yeah.
But I do hold out hope, I guess, that somehow the system could change in the future such that's more incentivized. Right?
Rank-based voting.
Yeah.
That would be...
I do like that idea a lot.
I think that's like the
So you
easiest...
voted yes on question 3.
I did, but I don't know if I actually... To be clear, because it was worded really poorly, question 3 was ranking... So basically...
there was 2 parts of it, right?
Yeah.
So the first part was to have open primaries.
Mm-hmm.
So essentially, like, you know, if you're a Democrat or Republican, you can vote in... If you're independent, you don't have to be registered to that certain primary to vote in it. And then the second one was the ranked choice voting. But it sounded like it wasn't for president. It was just for like Nevada elections.
Okay, that I like a lot.
Yeah.
I thought that it had to do with primaries, and in which case, you know, like I don't know. I had a weird understanding of it, but basically our pick for like a primary would be based on rank-based voting, but not like nationally, which doesn't make a lot of sense from a game theory perspective because you're just kind of it's the same problem as picking a third party, like voting for a third party candidate in the election, right? Like you kind of just say like my vote doesn't matter.
Well, the ranked choice voting allows it to matter because what happens is if you rank your choices, so like say you wanted...
Only if everyone in the system is doing rank-based choices, though. If one state is, and then the rest of the states are doing the traditional system.
Yeah, right. Because they can only going to win that one state.
Yeah,
right.
So like if we do rank-based voting for instance, like our mayor, that'd be super cool because everyone in the system is participating in that.
Exactly.
And I think that solves a lot of the problems that the average person voting sees, where like
It's a good way to onboard it too.
Yeah. And for
right.
anyone
It's
who
almost
doesn't-
certainly not going to be a federal
Right.
thing at first.
yeah.
I'd say
So
for
like,
anyone-
you let it
The idea that
happen
they're
at the local
normalizing
level.
it, like I felt it in my plums, man. I did my college thesis on voting theory. And,
Interesting.
and like I've just always been a big fan of that. I don't want to say concept, but basically, I think rank-based voting, like
That's why the GPI wars
it brings a lot of power back to the individual person. Where
Yeah.
I mean, you still see an issue. Like let's say that we switch to rank-based voting tomorrow for the national election. You still see the issue of the powers that be can control who gets time on stage, who we have insights on.
Who the general populace is more familiar with is always
Yeah.
going to be higher in the choice of ranking.
But I mean, it brings a lot of power back to the individual voter, where they don't have to say like I get to pick between a shit sandwich and a douchebag.
Especially if from there the cascading effect becomes how influence goes about, right? Like, because now at least there's ways to be innovative. What if a young politician comes through and just decides like they're solely going to focus on TikTok, and they're just going to churn out the young vote in the rank-based system, right? Now all of a sudden that might put them in that top 3.
Mm-hmm.
That could be enough. Like the point is like it does create opportunity to monkey wrench a system which currently doesn't exist.
Right. We're looking for solutions, like you said, that like to get rid of this 2-party system that's so broken.
Yeah.
Right. And go to a system where you could have 3, 4, 5 different choices. And now, now you're going to have like 2 candidates that kind of overlap on their policies and on their views, but yet one is a little different than the other one, which is nice. Now you get to make a choice between, certain things, and then you have a few other on the other side.
Right.
And then before you know it, you have 5 different choices, and it's more of a spectrum, and it doesn't lead to this divisiveness that we have.
We need so many more spectrums. All right, let's get to something that, even though we spent 70 minutes on something we know nothing about, let's get to something we know a little something
was
about.
like this.
Of course, that's how I felt about the movie review. I just want to talk about shit we don't know anything about, but let's get to the muck.
All right, so we do have another user submission. This one actually came me on Twitter, which I don't know why they don't just go to Discord, but it was a good one, so we decided to go with it. Our friend Alex here is playing online, but they just gave me the big blind, so I just put 5-10. I'm not sure the exact stakes, but they're playing 3-handed, and the button opens, and we have King of Spades, Jack of Hearts in the small blind, and we 3-bet to 110, folds back around to the button. Call. We are 100 big blinds effective, by the way. We get a flop of Queen of Diamonds, Jack of Spades, 10 of Spades. We lead half pot, and we get called. The turn is the 5 of clubs, and we lead again for 230, which is another half pot. We get called, and now the river is the 4 of spades, and we decide to shove all in, and we get a fold. So I think their main concern was the turn and river bets. Now they said it did work, but they were unsure if the candidate they had actually qualifies as bets here.
You want to start, Jesse, or do you want me to?
Sure. I kind of feel like this line is good sometimes. Like you're going to be approved in every node.
Yeah.
I would definitely be very careful about 3-betting a combo like this very frequently. You get into a lot of trouble bloating pots, especially out of position, but just like playing 3-bet pots with non-suited hands that have to try to have playability post-flop. There's a big difference between King Jack suited and King Jack offsuit. I think there's a reason why solvers tend to peel from the small blind with the King Jack offsuit a lot versus button. And
I have a question, Jesse,
3-bet.
in pertaining to what you just said. When you're playing in a 3-handed game, doesn't King Jack off small blind versus button become a little bit more of a 3-bet, or is that something that
I don't think it being 3-handed matters. I think this is just a pretty high frequency 3-bet.
Yeah, I would just treat it like button versus small blind regardless. There's like small removal effects from people not being behind and folding presumably
Like
bad
bunching,
cards.
you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, but like I think it's pretty minor in the whole, sphere of it.
Your range's not going to change like if it's 3-handed or if it just
No, but
6-handed folds.
I would push back a little bit. I think this hand 3-bets quite frequently. Like,
Does it?
I think it's more than half the time for sure.
Okay, I just generally lean on the idea that yeah, I mean maybe yeah, that's fair. I just generally lean on the idea that you want to be very careful with your offsuit combos in terms of 3-betting.
Yeah, I think this is like the bottom of high frequency. Then when you get to like the Queen Jack, Jack 10, King 10 type of stuff, you start to peel a lot more often.
Okay, fair enough. I always in my head just had it at King Queen because it's easier to start with like kind of the nutty
King Queen's
king,
the nut. Yeah, it doesn't matter what you do with that hand. It's just like always going to be good.
But that's fair. It feels like every other.
I think deeper
aspect
you
of this
become
hand.
correct for what it's worth. This is 100 big blinds. I think like if you examine 300 big blinds, this hand probably doesn't 3-bet very aggressively. I'm speculating.
Yeah, that's almost definitely true, right?
Yeah.
I feel like that's
I mean, I'm speculating because like
true.
I'm used to playing with an ante, so like you get to play call so much more from small blind that like these hands just naturally
it's
mix.
just going to be
anyway.
hard to navigate through 3 streets deep when you like have a hand that's like you said offsuit where you're not going to flop as much equity.
Everything
a lot of
Jesse said
times.
becomes very true when the SPR is deep.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, okay, so I don't know if we're including rake, for instance, but that might change it a little bit as well because then you theoretically get a little bit tighter and a little bit deeper in not deeper, but ranges look like you're deeper because you're playing a little bit tighter or whatever.
Well, I think
anyways,
I think with rake it becomes more aggressive of a 3-bet.
Yeah. One thing I always liked about talking to you about poker and like kind of your hands from the Bellagio game is that you really err towards using suited connectors and stuff for the 4 or 5 bets instead of blockers. And I like that in these really deep settings. I think it's even if it's like just an exploit, it's like kind of a cool way to go about it.
Yeah, it was a nice thing to see kind of somewhat confirmed by theory.
Yeah.
Landon refers to it as the Fantastic Four.
Yeah.
They're just a very special grouping, like a subgrouping of hands that get to forego their inability to block value and just become really nice bluff/board coverage. But I think that's kind of, as you mentioned, a byproduct of depth and recognizing how, for what it's worth, for better or for worse, when you're playing deep ante games, the vast majority of the lineups you're playing are freestyling. They don't know what pre-flop ranges look like. And to be completely fair, I'm not really sure that the general oversight that we have based off of what we've run up until this point is all that accurate anyway.
Yeah, probably not.
Right? Like looking at 500 big, I think, let me put it this way. I think that like the 500 big blind ranges I ran for heads up are probably reasonably accurate because you can solve for that, right? Like you can solve with a pretty high degree of accuracy a 1v1 type of scenario. But to extrapolate that out to 8-handed becomes really impossible. So in my mind, what I like to do is look at whatever we're able to get a glimpse of and then compare that to the heads up ranges and see how much they vary. And if you look at like button 4-bet range heads up with an ante at like 500 effective, 10-9 suited is pure. It's just a pure 4-bet, which is very non-intuitive, right?
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't seem like that in any capacity is okay, but it just is because you're only functionally lowering the SPR somewhat, and more importantly, you're still attacking a pretty wide range. Like King 5 off is 3-betting at that depth, and granted not high frequency, but like it's an aggressive 3-bet strategy for out of position. So you have to counter that in some sort of capacity. You have to have board coverage. Of course, you're going to want to use like some suited high lows, but you need to fill in the middle somewhere, and it can't just always be these linear pocket pairs, right? Like you don't want to just like threaten having a set on all boards in a 4-bet pot. It's much more important for you to be able to have like pair plus equity, straight draws, backdoor. You know what I mean? Like you're playing a 3-street game.
Yeah,
after
exactly.
The flop.
Yeah.
So it becomes really important to not be able to just rep the nuts on a flop. That's not that big of a deal. You want to be able to carry forward equity street over street. In these shallow spots, though, like what our user is facing here, this is where I'm less likely to challenge a pre-flop spot because I just don't know. I don't know if there's that much freedom for us to have gotten it wrong with the way that we're running these spots, you know, because effectively where the margin of error can come from is how you set up the post-flop game tree when you're running pre. But if you're only 100 effective playing a 3-bet pot where SPR is going to be sub 4, the post-flop game tree isn't that complex, right? You could just give a single size of 3E and probably do pretty well.
Yeah.
Without making many errors. That's not going to be the case if you're playing a 3-bet pot and the SPR is 20.
I thought it was interesting that you said that ranges don't change. I was always under the impression that like when I'm playing, like when I open up a table and I'm playing 3-handed, I always assume that my 3-bet ranges have to be a little bit wider because the blinds are hitting me that much faster. So you have to be more aggressive picking up those blinds. But according to what you're saying, so even if I'm playing full ring and whatever I'm 3-betting out of the small blind with versus the button is no different than if I was playing 3-handed.
Yeah, because your free hands don't mean anything. They just have EV attached to them.
So it doesn't matter that I'm getting hit with the blinds more often.
No, because every time you're the button, you're earning the EV of the button, right? So the button just becomes that much more valuable. You're getting the button that much more frequently too.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty big mistake then because I was just under the impression that you should be playing a lot wider.
I think that's a misconception that's a lot.
Very common.
Yeah.
Extremely common, I would say.
You hear people all the time in like 6-max tournaments be like, oh, I got to do stuff because it's 6-max. And you're like, well, actually.
They start finding like the 4-bets with like ace deuce offsuit. You're just like, buddy, have you lost your fucking mind? Yeah. They're like, what? There's 3 people missing.
Before we had big blind ante, it was actually the opposite too, where there's less antes in the pot, so you should actually be slightly tighter.
Right.
Than in a normal tournament.
That's a really good point that most people overlooked. But to be fair, Guapo, like there is a little bit of impact due to the bunching effect that Jesse kind of mentioned before, where it's like because those other spots don't exist, there's a higher concentration of both high and low cards, right? Like if 7 people fold, then you know that there's a higher concentration of high cards to the remaining 3 or the remaining 2, whatever. But if nobody folded, then it's like an even distribution of cards in the deck. It's not enough though to really sway your ranges. I imagine if we looked at like ranges ran for 3-handed compared to ranges ran for 8-handed, it might be like at most
like the button opened would look very, very similar.
Yeah, and then the defense ranges might be like at most 1% wider. Yeah, I would think.
So they're the same basically.
Basically the same. You're certainly not giving anything up. All right, let's move on to flop. We already got the solve up, but I was gonna say this is pretty much.
Yeah, look at that King Jack O, 60% or something.
Let's go.
Yeah.
65%.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
So this is a clear range bet board. Even though you can see that this 3-bet range out of the small blind is quite linear, especially versus a button open, the concentration to 10s, jacks, queens, aces, kings, and ace king is so great compared to impositions that we just have free reign to kind of go for it here. I'll show you the graph here blown up since my face is covering it a bit, but you can just see that the blue here is the small blind. We have a wide margin of advantage throughout the overall range, like top to bottom.
Yeah, it's rare you get to see
a
gap that big all the way.
Wow.
Across.
Yeah, so when you see gaps like this, these are very clear range bet spots.
Yeah.
Now, of course, like you can see we are checking like 4% of the time. That's more of a function, I think, of the SPR because we want to lean a little bit more on bigger sizings. So there are some hands that don't really want to put in 40% pot, like pocket eights, like some of the Fantastic Four here, the 7-6 of hearts. It's no pair, no draw, no backdoor type of stuff. Like these are kind of just like hoping that you catch your opponent with pocket sixes or like with ace 5 offsuit, no spade type of stuff. They're mostly going to be utilized as one and done. But if you simplify here to a single size and range bet, you're going to do just fine. And though our opponent chose half pot, you can see that 40% pot here is the most
Wait, before we
preferred.
move on,
Yep.
I want to ask you guys a question.
Go ahead.
What do you think our most frequent bluffs are going to be on the river given the run out in the line?
It's a really great question. I think it's going to be hands that block the ace of spade.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because
I was
the
thinking it
river's
would
a
be
spade.
specifically Okay, fair enough.
'Cause we don't
so it's
have,
gonna-
we don't
yeah,
have
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
ace X block, like
Correct.
ace X hands, right?
Well,
or
what-
ace X offsuit hands.
Right.
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 So it's not like we're gonna just have.
and I
We're
think
not
you-
gonna arrive with the negative ace of spades, right?
Correct. And I also think you want to unblock. I think you also want to unblock the king X that call folds. So
That may be true. I didn't see that there were that backdoor spade, or maybe I did see that backdoor spades got there, but we had a spade, so I was like, whatever.
yeah, I think the hand as chosen. I agreed with what you said. I think it's going to get approved on every node, but I think it's going to be low frequency turn and river.
Yeah. It feels like if the spade didn't get there, there would be more of an emphasis on having a king blocker in your
Agreed.
hand because all their hero calls want to have a king or an ace in them.
Yeah.
And probably more a king since we have like king 9 suited and stuff like
Yeah. Exactly.
that. But yeah, I don't know now.
Feels like when you bet the turn, you're starting to polarize, and you don't have a polarizing hand.
Well, sizing wise, not so much, but range construction wise, I think you're correct.
Yeah.
Like you're really not betting a jack very often on the turn. So basically, like the simple way to frame this is we're range betting, so our range is going to be static moving forward. They had a very wide raise call range pre, but facing 40% pot, it's going to shrink very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't become polar, but they become very linear in nature, right? They're
All
gonna,
those hands under like a 10 are just gone.
for the most, I mean, their 9x is going to continue almost in full. Their spades are
9x,
obviously
right, yeah.
continuing in full. And then their pair pluses are going to continue in full. And what we also have to recognize is I haven't looked ahead yet, but I'm pretty certain we're not going to see raise here very often just due to the presence of top of range for us, right? Like we just have way too many sets, way too many straights, and things of that nature where it becomes very difficult to take a hand like Jack 10 or Queen Jack or whatever and just like play for stacks. So they're also just pretty positioned in the calling, which means that they retain some of their traps. So by that proxy, I think ultimately the best triple barrel bluffs are the ones that block their auto call downs. We want to have as much blocking power over Queen Jack, Jack 10, Queen 10, pocket 10s, pocket jacks as imaginable. And then, having some blocking power over like King 9, I think becomes relevant. So I think a better bluff candidate for us on the end would probably be like, well, I don't know with the spade hitting, but if it's a non-spade like you originally proposed, I imagine it would be more like the 10-9 type of hands.
Yeah, I like that.
Maybe King 10 would be a better choice.
Yeah, I immediately thought about pocket 9s, like a 9
Pocket
of spades.
9s would be nice.
I just don't even know
9s
how
with the
often
9 of
we're gonna
spades
bet
would be
on the
nice
turn.
anyway, though. But yeah.
Yeah, and
agree
I
with
think you're saying 10-9 might be better than pocket 9s because blocking the 2-pair combos is quite nice.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, I think that's true. And we probably want them to have some 9x when we're tripling too. On a non-spade, not so much on a spade. So on a spade run out, I think maybe.
And I think blocking, like with 9s blocking the straight, like doesn't do that much, right? Because like the small blind doesn't have that many 9s in their range to begin with, right? So they don't have. I mean, they have like King 9 suited maybe, but
We have King 9, Queen 9, Jack 9 all in full, 10-9 in full, pocket 9s in full, Ace 9 close to full.
yeah.
So to be clear to people, this is the reason why we're looking for bluffs. I mean, it's always nice to block 2 pairs and stuff, but the reason why we're looking for these kind of obscure bluffs that have showdown value is because this is a board that hits our range as the 3-better so much that we kind of have to dig into hands with showdown value, like
Right.
a 10-9 type of hand or pocket 9s or whatever it may be, because everything has some showdown value. So you have to get a little bit creative with your bluffs. I guess you have some like ace 5 of hearts that you could bluff, but once the run out is
When the river's a spade, I think that changes.
When the backdoor flush draw gets there, I don't think we're going to be bluffing that.
Front door.
Oh, I thought it was a ring. I'm just way off in this hand.
I
aren't
mean, in your defense, like we're cropped funny. We're showing the bottom and not the top.
I can't see the
I gotcha.
But yeah, so it's Queen Jack 10, Queen of Diamonds, Jack 10 of Spades. And yeah, I agree. Like our bluffs on the river on a spade are going to be very different than our bluffs on the river no spade. So
now I can see the run out. This is nice.
I basically think that like
like this.
I think our river bluffs are mostly going to contain hands that are just low frequency turn bets. So it's going to be like our ace of spades jack, our king of spade jack, maybe I'm sure we're going to bluff with some non-spade hands. So we're probably going to want to have hands like Jack 9 at some frequency, 10-9 maybe at some frequency, or pocket 9s like you said with a spade. That would be a pretty nice one.
King 7s look really good here.
Yeah.
King 6s maybe.
Right. Yeah, and I would imagine that we would want to choose hearts clubs when we're tripling, because we'll get the immediate fold equity on the turn of all the diamond peels. And then, or maybe not. Yeah, I think that's right.
What do you think's our lightest value jam on the river?
Ace queen.
Queen jack. Ace queen I think is too light. Ace queen with the ace of
Queen
spades
10?
feels too light.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking somewhere around like queen jack.
I guess we
or
don't have
10.
queen. We don't really have queen jack.
Jack 10.
I guess we have queen jack suited, yeah.
Jack 10's kind of a weird one where I don't know what is really going on with it.
Jack 10 might be better because you might just free up so much king queen to call.
Yeah, true. Jack 10's tough.
But yeah, I mean, basically, like we could just speak more generally about hand class. It's probably going to be 2-pair because we're not shoving for that much money. We're shoving for like half-ish pot, 2/3 pot, something like that.
Yeah.
So the barrier to jam is no longer going to be a flush, which kind of brings me back full circle to like, I don't know how important it is to block a flush when we're bluffing. Kind of just want to mirror your value. So blocking like the auto calls, the 2-pair type of hands, probably a big deal. Let's figure it out.
Yeah, let's see.
So we do see a range bet here. That's going to be pretty common. Like I said, not much in the way of raising. You can see king 9 suited is one of the highest frequencies. 9-8 suited the second. 9-8 of spades being the highest. This is mostly just for protection. If you have a straight, you're getting stacked by ace king. Period. There's no getting around it. I think people are afraid to put money voluntarily in when they have the second and third nuts because the nuts are out. But it's like, you're going to get stacked. So if you're going to play raises here, you're going to want to lean on king 9, 9-8 as your value. Aces is going to kind of want to do it for value / protection. And then you're going to have like, a lot of semi bluffs in the king 8, king 6, king queen-ish,
There's not
ace
much of them,
9-ish.
though.
Yeah.
I also like to think of like hands like 9-8 raising here as you're not so much protecting your own hand as protecting from a bad card coming off and you don't get value against their sets or their 2-pairs anymore.
Right.
Whereas like if you look at king 9, it's raising a little bit less, likely because it's a little bit more durable of a hand. And
Yeah.
I mean, that matters. Like if an ace comes off, now your 9-8 is not
That's a really
great
good
anymore,
qualification. Sometimes I think we say protection too generally. We're not saying it for the sense of protecting in that you want like hands drawing against you to fold. That's not a thing. What we're saying is we want to inflate the pot before the board gets bad.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that we're not going to stack off if the board, like if a king comes, we're still probably getting stacked with 9-8 at an SPR of like 2, but we're much happier to get stacked if the SPR is like 0.75. Like the money just goes in a lot more naturally.
Yeah.
At that point. But if we do play raise, you can see it's basically a click. So for all intent and purposes, this largely just isn't going to be much of a play that you see out in the wild. So you should expect some traps here. We see on turn 5 now, it's going to lean the 2E size, which is going to be 67%. Or no, actually it's not. That's not quite 2E. I think like 75-ish% would be 2E. Anyway, it's going for 2/3 pot mostly. I'm going to simplify
It's got to be
this.
less than 75%, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, because you shot because it went.
I think 67%.
yeah,
is
yeah,
gonna be
went
very
half.
close.
Yes, yeah. You're right. 2E is 67. You're right. But I'm going to put in the actual size we chose, which is 50. It should basically combine these two strategies. We'll get around 30-ish. Oh, it actually goes up a bit, 40% now. And yeah, you can see that like our Jack X region just doesn't really want to do too much in the way of betting. Ace Jack only really betting when it has a spade, with the exception of being Ace of Hearts, Jack of Diamonds. Not really sure why that one.
Can I see his specific hand, Matt? The King Jack off?
So yeah, King of Spades is going to want to bet more often. It's about 50-50 mix when you have the King of Spades. And I think that is a byproduct of needing some resiliency on a river spade.
King 10 off pure betting. was something I was going to predict, but that makes a lot more sense because there may be some Jack X you actually get to fold, so it's a big win. Whereas like King Jack off betting, I can't really think of many queens that are folding.
Right.
I don't even think like Queen 8 suited is folding the turn.
Right, and you're not really getting value from much worse in the Jack X region.
Yeah.
Right? You need him to have exactly Jack 9 and then like kind of hold on to it, which we actually think that might be one of the ones that folds.
Yeah. Or even if it does, like, it's just, you're just accomplishing so much more betting King 10 if you're going to bet one of the kings.
Yeah, and you also have it at a much lower frequency. So your betting frequencies don't get out of whack this way.
Do you think he's
either.
folding ace jack?
No, I would imagine Jack 9's indifferent and ace jack probably calls, but I could be wrong there. The king is just much better for ace jack than Jack 9 when it's all said and done, and the 8 isn't really all that important.
Pocket 9's pure checking, so that's not going to bluff river.
Right.
Pocket 8's with the spade presumably betting, so that probably finds a river bluff on a spade.
Yeah, I think we'll see it from there. We'll see it only 7-6 of spades is betting, same thing with 8-7. So yeah, I think it might just come from the high lows. You can see ace 5 is like nearly a pure bet in all combos. So kind of like what you mentioned, the ace 5 of hearts could potentially turn itself into a bluff.
Yeah.
And again, this is a factor of the river sizing being relatively small in accordance to the pot. If it were a 2x pot jam, I don't think ace 5 of hearts gets in there. It's too sensitive to just needing to block flushes, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Because like, yeah, you're not going to be against pocket 5s very often. So like, and you're obviously never against ace king. So the two cards that you hold in that instance aren't really worth much in getting folds.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're jamming for a 2/3 pot, you can expect them to be a little bit less critical in how they call down. They're going to have wider calls than flushes. Okay, so the response now by imposition, let's see if any raises get in there. Not really. A little bit of jamming, mostly coming from a value range that is, again, looking to protect.
Looks like ace jack is folding a little bit. Ace jack off.
Oh, yeah,
right?
ace jack is going to mix. Does it matter? Oh, it actually wants to pure fold with the ace of spades. Mainly because I think your double barrel bluffs are going to be nut flush draws. That makes some sense to me.
That's funny. I would have thought
Jack 9 also indifferent, kind of as we said. Diamonds being the pure call.
I would have thought a lot of the nut flush draws would check the turn because bet folding really sucks. As the PF preflop 3 better. I don't know.
I don't know that they bet fold is the thing.
Well, I mean, if you have, I'm trying to think of what. Okay, so like let's look at like ace 6 or something of spades.
Yeah, pure bet.
Yeah, they just bet really big and they bet 50%.
Yeah.
It must be bet folding, right?
Well, you're getting jammed on for 71%. But yeah, you're right. It does bet fold. The ace 9, ace 8s are the ones that call because they still have gut shot outs.
Yeah.
Outside of the
double gutters or open ended. Yeah.
Ace 8's double gutted. And ace 9's open ended.
I think if there were multiple sizings in there, ace 6 would just pick like a bigger size when it bets so it can call off or something silly. Yeah.
I could see that being the case, yeah.
But I could be wrong about that. You see it a lot.
Right. And the other side from the betting standpoint, it looks like we kind of favor when we bet having the ace of spades, of course. So that's probably another reason why ace jack with the ace of spades wants to fold. Although these are all value hands, so maybe that's not quite as important. It has to just be more so the nut flushes are just double barreling here almost always. So unblocking that's just worth a lot. So yeah, ace jack, jack 9, kind of as we supposed, are indifferent. Maybe that gives a little bit more credibility than to king jack finding its way in there some of the time, but definitely gives more credence to the king 10 type of bluffs. 10-9 now becomes a pure fold. So like his 9x region just basically starts pure folding unless it is ace 9 specifically, mainly leaning on the nut flush draw. And then, of course, ace 8 of spades is going to continue in some sort of capacity. All of his Fantastic Four has to continue when it's spades. Has just a tiny sliver of pocket 5s. Looks like he has one combo that he pills on the flop at a very low frequency. But again, it's not that big of a deal, so it's not really going to adjust our strategy much. We're going to see that continue through a call. Before we go on here, I think it's important to just kind of like recognize what types of hands we're going to be targeting on the end. When a river spade does come off. So it's going to be the king X region, as I kind of mentioned. Like king queen, I assume is going to be indifferent. And then all the worst hands like king jack and below are just going to they're going to fold like linearly in order, I think. King 10 folding the most, King Jack second most, et cetera, et cetera. Now, of course, like the worst ones, like the King 8 and the King 6s, they're only going to exist in spades. So us having the King of Spades is nice because now these combinations aren't even there. We'll also be targeting I guess all the Ace X that kind of arrives here is just going to be spades. So those are going to be the hands that snap us off. I would imagine Ace Queen off probably becomes indifferent, and Ace Jack off for sure. Just pure folds, I would bet, or at least close to it. So like these are the regions that we're basically targeting, is the one pair hands that have to stay consistent through the turn, but ultimately we'll find river folds on the something
4 spades.
Something of spades, 4 spades. All right, so you see that King Jack off bluffs at a relatively low frequency, only going to be King of Spades,
Jack of Hearts.
Yeah. So it mixes between 40% and jam. I suspect that like the mixing of sizings here is an indication that it's kind of a merging candidate, if you will, right? It's like the top of value for 40%. Or sorry, maybe the bottom of value for 40%, but like the top of our bluff range for all in.
It's also kind of a weird solve because I think you're in strategy EV, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's saying that check is performing decently better than the all in or the bet option.
Right.
So one of two things is going to happen if you continue to solve the sim. Like either
the bet will go away, or
it'll say that they're even.
Yeah.
This comes up a lot because, the solver never finishes solving, but you can kind of figure out where it's going.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I was saying like this is a mergy candidate. So you can see that betting 40% here is the lowest EV, but it does show up here at some frequency. That just kind of indicates to me that like the 40% bet size would go away as a whole, like as a strategy component in general. Like it'll just kind of disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry, that's not even bet 40. It's bet 25. So it's mixing between jam and quarter.
Wait,
that makes more sense because
really?
like
quarter is definitely going to go away because look at how much it's making. Yeah.
Because 40% is so close to a jam, right? Then like why would it choose like such a similar sizes?
Yeah, I mean we can just kind of clean this up ourselves, right? We could just make it a simple.
Yeah, just make it a jam or check slot, right?
Yeah, I like that because realistically, what's probably going to happen is jam is going to become the same EV as check.
Right. So now you just see that it just gets a little bit more finicky, right? So the candidates that were mixing between two sizes actually still continue forward with a jam. The ones that were a single size at a very low frequency now just prefer check because it's just simply outperforming. And yeah, I think that this is pretty reasonable. Kind of indicates like where we're going to start to pull our bluffs from. So King Jack off, very low frequency bluff candidate. King 10 off, much higher frequency. So you could see with the King of Spades, it's a pure jam. And then it's utilizing the King of Diamonds here at some frequency, relatively high frequency. I imagine just because I'm not really sure.
Sorry to get off track, but this Aces jam is so ballsy.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I mean, it is only doing it with the spade.
Yeah.
Is it a bluff?
I mean, you got to do it with only the spade, right? Like you just run into it too much if you don't. But
that makes sense.
I don't.
It's not a bluff.
I don't think it's a bluff. I think it's thin. Like if we look at calls,
getting snapped by the nuts.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at calls, like Ace Queen with the Queen of Spades calls at a pretty high frequency.
But they don't exist when we have the Ace of Spades.
Ace Queen with the Queen of Spades.
Queen of Spades. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's going to call it a reasonably high frequency. King Queen is mixing. So like Aces is going to get some value here. It's not going to be worth a lot. You can see the jam here is only worth basically $38 in a pot that is roughly 1,800 or something like that, or 1,500 or something like that at this point. So, you're making like, I don't know, 2% pot share. Not really very substantial. If you played pure check with this hand, nobody's going to be upset at you for it.
If you're 10% through the field in an MTT. There's probably enough ICM
Yeah.
that you can just start checking the river.
Yeah, you could probably check on this one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I do think to your end, it's important to find out where our bluffs are coming from. So 10-8 is actually one of the purest ones. Blocking the 9-8, blocking the 2 pairs, blocking some sets.
Yeah.
That's going to go for it. As you mentioned, 8s with the 8 of spades, of course, that was a no-brainer.
All the 8s even. I think I see hearts clubs in there.
Oh yeah, I didn't think they got to the river. I didn't realize they were betting the turn.
Yeah, that I didn't know that either.
That's
cool.
kind of interesting. It actually was preferring not to choose the 8 of spades when betting the turn. Only the 8 of spades, 8 of diamond combo chose to bet the turn. The other ones were much higher frequency. So yeah, just pocket 8s in general. Basically blocking. These are all flushes. These are all straights and or flushes. Ace 10, doing a little bit of bluffing, going for it with ace 10 of clubs. So it's actually not very reliant on having a spade as we initially supposed, or as I initially supposed.
I mean, I thought so too. The 10-9 that you called out is pretty heavily in there, which is nice.
Yeah, that's going to be pure with the exception of diamonds. And I think that's probably a byproduct of the 2 pair block mainly. So the reason why I'm speculating it doesn't want diamonds is because it only blocks Jack 10 of diamonds then, as opposed to if you have the other 2 suits, then you're blocking Queen 10 as well. So you just get more coverage.
Interesting that it seems like. Oh wait, all those King 7, King 8s are just spades.
Yeah, these are all just flushes.
Okay. I was gonna say it was interesting that it cares more about blocking an 8 than a king. But I don't even think that's true. But it does. I mean, we do mostly bluff with an 8 in our hand.
It's more so that like our King X that gets there is just too strong to bluff.
Yeah,
for the most part.
Yeah, except for King 10-0.
Yeah, King 10's kind of like the one. King 10 suited too. Like purely goes for it. So like that's the one where we get to kind of like have blocking power over the king and the 2 pair. And it's also just a byproduct of like how they call, right? Like you don't really want to choose the hands to bluff with that actually fold. Like I don't want to bluff King Jack if you're folding King Jack kind of thing. And then on top of that, it's like he's still calling some of the time, but not always with King Queen. Yeah. So like having blocking power over that isn't necessarily that critical, but like they're always calling 9-8. They're all. I guess like it would be nice to have the 8 of spades somehow, but that's going to be very difficult. That's the biggest. It's funny. This turned into a very long in the muck.
These are good hands.
Yeah. But I think it's very eye opening because what is intuitive is that we want to block flushes. What is counterintuitive is that we don't have any offsuit hands to block flushes with that are worthy of bluffing, right? So essentially, what ends up happening in these situations is we want to block 3 portions of our opponent's calling range. We want to be able to block flushes, we want to be able to block straights, and we want to be able to block 2 pairs. And what we recognize is that if you look at the Venn diagram, there's almost 0 Venn diagram overlap between a flush and any of the other 2 categories. Because if we have the queen of spades, we don't want to bluff it. It's too strong, right? And we can't have the naked 8 or 9 of spades. So those are just gone. And now like anything that would have the naked king of spades or ace of spades is kind of too strong with the exception of ace 10, king 10, right? Yeah. So like there's no overlap now between flushes and the other 2 categories. So what we really want to merge into now is we want to be able to block straights and we want to be able to block 2 pairs and sets. Yeah. So now we're looking for like second pair, bottom pair, and straight blocks. 10-8, pure combo. King 10, pure combo. You know, these types of things. Very counterintuitive, I think, to how people would see this spot if they have to figure it out on the fly. Right. That's why studying matters.
Yeah.
So guys,
absolutely, and that's why this is a cool hand.
This is a cool hand.
All in all, what do we think about Alex going for it on the river? Pros and cons.
I think it might overperform in reality, so it's probably decent.
I agree with that.
I'd prefer to do it live than online, probably.
Also agree with that. Yeah. I don't know why, but like, for sure.
Right. You're more likely getting snapped like online, or you're gonna get more folds live.
The counter argument to this though is that like live, brother on the button has 9-6 of spades all fucking day.
Yeah, true.
Right? Like we're not
They're
sweating,
way more constructed live.
right? We're not really sweating the 9-6 of spades here too much in the online venue.
True.
However, live, my guy still might just fold Jack 10.
Yeah.
Also.
Yeah,
right?
that's the thing.
Right.
So it's like, I think you do overperform.
I mean, I might be acting a bit biased because I'm taking for granted the fact that we're always deeper live, and so like this bluff works a little bit more when you're piling more in on the river.
That's true. In this instance, though, we were only 100 bigs, so it is a little bit more parallel.
No, but I'm saying like I'm
he's saying
conceptualizing the live difference, but I'm not,
you're
I'm
gonna
not
be deeper, so
bringing
you can
up the
shove
fact
for
that
more.
I'm shoving for like 1.25
Right, and
on
not
river.
Yeah,
or
not
more.
65% or
Yeah.
whatever it is. Yeah.
Also, the other thing is that like if you're just talking pure skill set, they're just going to land on river with too many hands live more often than online.
Yeah.
Also true.
And that's a nice thing to be able to shoot at a target, even if you can't identify what that target is. Just knowing that it's broader than it should be.
Yeah. People
that's
have
good
a
enough.
lot of trouble finding folds with like the ace jacks, the king tens,
Exactly.
suiteds, or whatever that we see here folding 50% of the time or whatever.
Yeah, totally
Yeah.
agree.
So what do we think? Wizard gives him a
Thumbs
yay
up.
or an A?
I think thumbs up. He was approved in every node to begin with, and like Jesse said, this probably overperforms live.
Bling.
Well
Good
done,
job, Alex.
sir. Well done.
Did he give us results? Did he get it through?
It did get it through.
Yeah, you got it
Let's
through.
go.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah.
Jesse, as always, it's been a pleasure. Appreciate you coming in on such a volatile day where we get to discuss strategies from two totally different worlds.
I got to get out of here and start counting votes.
By counting, he means drinking.
Wow.
He's going to start drinking votes. Shot every time the state goes red.
Oh, man, it's only 50. Wait. Oh, goes red. I thought you meant every time one gets called.
No.
All right.
That's going to do it for us. If you guys want to submit your own in the muck, be sure to head over to our Twitter at onlyfriends_pod. Click the pinned tweet. It'll take you to our Discord community. We have an entire forum dedicated to in the muck. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know who you're voting for. Why the fuck not? Why not? Let's just
let us know. Let us know and let us know why.
Yeah,
If you have a strong
Speaking of
political
engagement
opinion,
farming,
share it
Burke.
with Berkey.
Yeah, if you want to tell us exactly why we're your favorite political podcast, by all means, take to the comments. We're
That's
ready
right.
for them all.
Give us your hot takes, too. What do you think's going to happen tonight?
That's right. And let us know what you would do with King Jack on that particular texture. That's going to do it for us. We'll be back tomorrow, noon Pacific. We're actually joined by one and only Marley Sprague will be joining us in studio. We'll catch up with her a little bit. We'll find out what her hot takes are on the political climate, as well as how the NAPT has been treating her. That's going to do it for us. We'll see you guys all then.
Peace.
Peace.